Welcome to another QEDTalks. We've got Chris here, aka TreantMonk. You may have recognized him from one or two places in the internet. He's been around for at least a little while. Go ahead, for those peons that may not understand your awesomeness out there. Why don't you give a little intro who you is?
Sure. So my name is Chris, and I run a YouTube channel called TreantMonk's Temple. And before I did the YouTube channel, just as a hobby, I used to write guides for role-playing games online. And I did that kind of off and on, but for many years beforehand. So when I started my YouTube channel, some people knew me already. And I started the YouTube channel about 4 years ago, and I've been doing it full time for this will be my third year. This year, I'll hit my anniversary.
Nice. Now you built it up pretty fast. Then it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah. I'm glad I got there, because doing that on top of the full-time job was kind of grueling.
Yeah, editing is my bane. I don't mind filming it. I don't mind doing the scripts. I don't any of that stuff. And
I love writing scripts.
It's really weird. I can sit down for hours and hours and plan out campaigns in meticulous detail, but when it comes to editing a video, come on, not fun.
I tend to not mind the first 20 minutes, and then the next several hours are a slog.
Yeah. So I'm going to start out the way I start out with everyone I've had on here so far, and that's to sort of get a baseline of how you started in the hobby in general. So how did you hear about RPGs, and did you have any preconceived notions about the hobby before you started into it?
The hobby was not really a big thing when I got into it, so I definitely didn't have any preconceived notions. My brother got me into playing D&D with basic D&D, and I was 9 maybe at the time, and that was it was either 80 or 81. I can never remember exactly. I got really into it right away, and switched to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and found my own group of friends to play with. After second edition, I kind of branched out into different role-playing games, and then I kind of came back to D&D at third edition, then left again, then came back to D&D with fifth edition.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the way most of us went, because in second edition, don't get me wrong, I played second edition a lot. We played the hell out of second edition, but that was also the period of time where D&D was kind of waning for a while, and all the other systems were really picking up. So we played a billion other systems at that same time, and
there are a lot of games at that time I think are just straight out better than second edition D&D. If you look behind me, stacked on the top of my bookcase are a bunch of Deadlands books that are there, because I'm planning to do some one-shots for Deadlands. That we got into that after second edition, and it's just way better than D&D. We played GURPS. We played Vampire the Masquerade. I think they're all better than D&D.
Vampire! I remember doing Vampire both on tabletop and in LARP form, because that was the time.
LARPing was big for Vampire in particular.
Yeah. And then I remember branching out. Not I wouldn't say every system I tried it was definitely better. I've had
not all of them.
I've had a love-hate relationship with Rifts.
Rifts is a terrible system. Well, the Palladium system is a terrible system.
Yeah.
In general, but Rifts is the worst of the Palladium system for balance.
See, I love the setting. I thought the setting was great, but he needed
Shadowrun. Same thing. Good setting, terrible rules.
Oh yeah, they tried to fix it several times. They just made it more complicated each time, I swear.
they cannot get it right, and I don't know why, but they cannot.
No.
I think they're on 6th edition now, and it's 6 bad editions.
I think so. I think the last one I played was 5th, and it was only once. So I think they're on 6th now. And I don't think I've actually bought one of the books since 3rd edition.
No, every edition I kind of look online to see if it's gotten better reviews from players, and every single time it's the same. So
Yeah, I think we all flipped back, and everyone seems to have followed fairly close paths when it came to that stuff, especially the era of like between second edition to Pathfinder, aka like 3.75. Like everyone kind of followed that same course, like it was a river.
Yeah,
for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I play with a number of people who played 4th edition, but most of them started with 4th edition. I very seldom meet someone who played 3.5, then went to 4th, then went to 5th. That's a fairly rare path.
I know you've got videos on the subject, so we don't have to like rehash or anything, but I think we all kind of agreed that 4th edition, if it had been called something else with a different IP, then people may have accepted it, being like, okay, not too bad, not the greatest, but not too bad. But calling it D&D,
yeah,
no.
There's some admirable stuff in 4th edition. You know, I do think it gets a bad rap to some degree, but I think that's what it was, is people played it and it didn't feel like D&D, and that was the issue.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. I get why they were doing that. They wanted to branch out, reboot. 3rd edition was feeling bulky and stale and kind of getting broken and crazy at that point. So they're like, let's start fresh. But that was a little too fresh. But for those that are new to the travesties that have happened with 5th edition these days, guess what? This is not the first time Wizards has done stuff to try and shake things up and not go well. It's just same shit, different day.
Though I don't think the GSL had the same impact that OGL had this time around.
No,
and it might be because YouTube wasn't a thing. I think it's just important to keep in mind that people who do YouTube do it partially because we like it. We also do it partially for income. And we want the views. And there's no question that the YouTube algorithm supports stuff that's more over the top than reason takes.
Yeah,
it just does. And so we're incentivized to exaggerate or make big deals out of things. It's not something we can control, and it's probably a bad thing, but it does in something like this, it does tend to make things, kind of hyper accelerate in a way that isn't always healthy, I think.
Yeah, it's not like, I'm not saying what Wizards did with the LGL thing was a great concept. When you give someone something and then take it away, that feels a billion times worse than you've never gave it to them in the first place.
I mean, to be clear, it was still stupid.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It was still, I don't want to suggest anything other than that. It was a dumb move by Wizards of the Coast. They shouldn't have done it. I think they know that now, right? Like they've taken some serious lumps. So, they've learned that lesson the hard way. But yeah, I do think there was some exaggerated reaction.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's very much like the left hand wasn't talking to the right hand, and I think everyone in the sections of the company were trying to do their own thing, and then lawyers and executives got a little bit too lawyery and executive-y.
It sounds to me like there was terrible communication within the company, there was terrible communication with third-party publishers, and there was terrible communication with the public.
Yeah, my personal issues with Wizards of the Coast and stuff, I have issues with myself in playing 1D&D, but it has nothing to do with the OGL. I was already having some personal issues with the way their books are being released and stuff. So I think the OGL thing was just a little extra.
Well, and it was kind of a perfect storm because it fell right on top of D&D is under monetized. Right. It was so there was already things rolling, and then this was thrown on top. It was fuel on the fire.
That's my other unpopular opinion. Okay, in many ways they could monetize it in very bad ways with stupid microtransactions, become the full EA of the RPG world. But in many ways, I didn't disagree with that statement. D&D could be a monetary house with more toys and more shows and
my least popular video in the last 2 months was saying basically the same thing.
Oh, I didn't see that one yet. I gotta look it up.
I basically said that, for a CEO to say that a brand that they're in charge of they want more money out of it should be the least surprising thing we've ever heard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think it's more about, I don't know, people had a knee-jerk reaction to it because they're so worried like it's going to go down the hole that video games basically has.
Yeah.
And I get that fear. I fear that fear. D&D Beyond actually kind of scares me in some way because of the digital content you don't actually fully own. You just have access to.
No, you have a license.
Yeah.
You own a license.
It's like my Steam library. If Steam went, you don't have your games anymore, I'd be like, well, shit. That scares me. That stuff scares me. I hope that's not a focus.
I mean, I don't think they're going to take your content away from you. I just don't think they're going to do that.
I don't see it, especially now that like people were willing to like mob mentality rise up and be like, hey, screw you, Wizards. I think they realized if they fuck around again, they're going to find out.
I own a bunch of content on D&D Beyond, and if I lose it because they decide they want to end my license, I will have egg on my face, but I just don't see it happening. Yeah.
So starting in 3.5, what led you to actually want to start putting out like these guides on the internet rather than just like being a thing that you know and talk about with friends?
All right. So I was not the first person to do guides for D&D, and they were being shared on on the Wizards of the Coast forums at the time. And the reason I wanted to do my own guides is because I would read the guides that were there and I would disagree with things. And I wanted a bigger voice in being able to disagree and put out my own opinion. So that's what it really was. And I found the writing of guides was a fun diversion, right? You'd be sitting down and you're bored and you're like, I'm going to work on a guide. And then you pour yourself a glass of wine and you start writing.
Yeah. Well, it's very different 13 to 15 years ago or whatever, when, I mean, like YouTube was a thing, but like none of this was as big of a deal. We're still very much on the forums, like doing stuff.
Yeah. I also found, and this wasn't something that I had planned beforehand, but something I found very helpful was I would put out a guide and then I'd get responses saying, oh, you missed this thing, or, oh, you've made a mistake over here. And it would be, so I'd increase my own, I was supposed to be sharing my wisdom with other people, but I found I was collecting as much wisdom as I was putting out there, and that was helpful to me as well.
Well, especially in the 3.5 and Pathfinder first edition days, like so many little fiddly bits everywhere, sometimes not interacting with each other well. You can't 100% have everything.
And the great thing about a written guide is somebody will point out a mistake and you can just go correct it. That's something you can't do with YouTube videos.
Oh yeah, I wish I could like splice in bits or something. That would be great.
Yeah.
No, yeah, that's a good way to get feedback. Yeah. And now in your guides, I always remember everything's being like color coded for like great to bad and stuff like that. Was that something that you got from someone else, or was that just like?
Yeah, I often am credited for that, and I am incorrectly credited for that. I still remember the person who I think came up with it, and they went by the handle Dictum Mortuum, and they did the first color coded guides I ever saw, and I ripped it off of them. So whenever I get credited for color coding guides, I am being incorrectly credited.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was a thing that you had done or not, because I'd seen like in other industries and stuff like similar concepts, so I was like, maybe you probably just got it from somewhere.
Well, I mean, it's possible they got it from D&D guides, but I'm not the first person to do it for D&D guides.
So you've made a video about your experiences leading up to like Pathfinder 2nd edition and stuff, so we're not gonna rehash that. Honestly, it's a great video. If anyone watching this hasn't watched it yet, finish watching this video, but then go check it out. He gets not only very straightforward about it, but I think you kind of get a little honest with your feelings and like sort of like show yourself a little bit in it, which was pretty cool. I see that with the whole OGL fiasco finally calming down. Wizards has a good few years before they try something again like this for the third time. I feel like you've taken a stance. A lot of D&D, like devoted D&D content creators have, where it's like, I just want to get back to business. Let's do our thing. But at the same time, you've also mentioned you want to branch out a little bit just to look at other systems, not put all your eggs in one basket. Is there any system that's really been piquing your interest lately that you haven't gotten to try yet?
of course, we're doing Cypher on Thursday.
Yeah.
And because, I know Monty Cook, of course, from 3rd edition, right? So, I already have some respect for his ability to create interesting rules. I remember once he left Wizards of the Coast, he started doing Swords and Sorcery books.
Yes,
that were like 3rd edition compatible books, and there was some really neat ideas in those. I remember a bard that didn't use spells, but it had like chords and notes and all these things that had kind of magical effects, and I thought was really cool. So I'm interested to see what he's done, because I've heard of Cypher and I've never tried it. Then I used to play Cyberpunk, but I recently played Cyberpunk Red for the first time. And I can see definitely the roots of the system in the Cyberpunk 2020. I remember, but I also see improvements. And it's nice to see when an addition occurs and they improve the game, and it appears that's what's happened with Cyberpunk. I mean, I don't have a list of games that I want to try. I'm just kind of open to trying new games at this point, and we'll see how they go.
Yeah, I think once you reach a certain point in your RPG career, you just like whatever's shoved in front of you. It's like, I'll give it a try once, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've branched out to a lot of different ones over the past year. I played my first games of like Kids on Brooms and Tales from the Loop, and a lot of the little like oddball like little ones, and they're interesting for sure. I also tried my first Cyberpunk Red, and my first game of it, I think I got a bad coloring of it because we just didn't know what we were doing, and there was like the fall off charts for the weapons that I wasn't super fond of. I'm like, I don't want to figure that out. But
I love that chart.
Oh, did you? I think
I'm okay. At this range, should I be using my pistol or my assault rifle? I was a little distressed that the assault rifle had such a narrow window where it's actually better than just shooting someone with a pistol. But
I think for me, it was we played it using Foundry, and it was supposed to auto calculate it for us, and it kind of got a little glitchy at the time because it was like when it was first coming out or whatever. Okay. And it would have been better if we had just played it like just us figuring out the math, because like I have an engineering background. I have no problems with crunch in a game, and if I had just been doing it in my brain pan instead of trying to let the computer do it, I think I would have liked it better. And then the second time we did do that, and I liked the game much better. So
the one thing I'll say, just from a gameplay point of view, is like, did you play a lot of Cyberpunk before?
Yeah,
Cyberpunk
I've got the 2020 books and everything.
Do you remember how everyone ends up with an assault rifle?
Yeah. Right? Yeah.
So I kind of like, even though it's not realistic at all, I kind of like that there's some incentive that assault rifle's not always the answer, right?
Yeah, you're not just mowing people down with just the spray of bullets and stuff,
and there's even some incentive to use melee weapons, and so you get that, if everyone's just walking around with an assault rifle, I kind of lose the thematics, right? But when you can choose the stylistic option and have a mechanical reason to do so, when you're an optimizer like me, then I consider that a big positive.
The thing I always liked about Cyberpunk is it didn't pull its punches. Like Telsorian Games made it's a lethal game if you're stupid. You got to play smart. You got to be tactical. You've got to have a well-built character. So optimization is an important thing in that. Because I had a buddy, first time he'd only ever played D&D before. We did a Cyberpunk game. It was his first time, and it was a club. And we had to I was the GM. They had to go in there and find out information and stuff. And so he just rushed the door with two guys standing there, gangers with fully automatic rifles. And he just rushed them thinking it was D&D, kick down the door, kill the goblins. They just mowed him down. And he was like, that's way too powerful. I'm like, they're assault
you just
rifles.
Got shot. Yeah.
So I was kind of like that. You got to play smart. You got to play tactically.
Yeah. I do remember in the old system, if you got hit and then the DM rolled a 10, that was it.
Yeah. 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 It was even in the new one, it's still pretty harsh, but not in a bad way. I don't mind it. I don't mind it.
You now have to make a called shot if you want to hit somebody in the head, and that's not easy to do.
Yeah. So a big part of who you are, obviously, is your optimization guides and stuff like that. I know when it comes to like the RPG computer community, it's optimization is a divisive and large split between those that think like, hey, that's great, I'm playing the game better, versus like, this is a detriment to the hobby, you're ruining it, blah, blah, blah. Do you see the numbers on either side of this divide, like growing or shrinking as time's going on?
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't see even a fraction of the number of hate for optimization that I saw 10 years ago, right? I think it's largely come to the point where you're having fun, great.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a fairly modern take, unfortunately.
Trying to fight the gatekeepers.
But it is definitely moved in that direction a huge amount. I don't know if I see the number of actual optimizers increasing. It's probably staying fairly stable, because I think it's just most people are just accepting of it now rather than like diving in.
Yeah, to me, it's whether it's good or bad is more about, first of all, why you're optimizing. Some people are just doing it to break the game and it ends up ruining everyone's fun. And some people are just trying to play the game well. I mean, it's a game. You don't sit down at Risk and say, I give up all of my guys. Like,
I separate optimization from bad behavior.
Yeah.
Because, just because somebody's trying to wreck your game and steal all the attention, these are behavioral issues. They're not optimization issues. And a person doesn't need to optimize to do those things. We sometimes see them paired with optimization techniques, and sometimes we don't. But that is an indicator that you have a bad player, not that they're using the wrong, style of play.
Now, don't get me wrong. Those of us that like to tinker with the numbers sometimes will make builds that would break the game, but I'm not going to bring them into the game. I remember sitting down in Pathfinder 1st Edition with my buddy Brian and like making a wizard that could backstab with a fireball doing like 40 d6 damage, and like,
I do. I sometimes separate with language, and I'll say, something is theoretical or it's practical.
Yeah. Right.
And if it's theoretical, that means it's probably not healthy for the game, and so we probably shouldn't do it.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, it also depends a little bit on the system as well. Like, you're not going to try and like optimize your character in a narrative heavy game like Fate or something like that. It just doesn't work. But if it's something like D&D or Pathfinder, which like you trace it and it's going back to their wargaming roots, 95% of the rules are about combat, and there's like they're more regimented rules. I mean, optimizing literally, it to me, it's just you're playing the game well. It doesn't mean you can't role play at the same time. A lot of people, I think, have that black and white either or.
Yeah. And like D&D is, I wouldn't say it's a combat game because so much of the gameplay isn't combat, but the mechanics are combat mechanics.
Yeah.
Right. You read the books and read the features, and the vast majority of them are directly combat related. And so if you want to analyze rules and use rules and pick your best options, you're optimizing for combat usually.
Yeah. And of course, if you guys need more guides on how to do this, his channel will be in the link down below. And of course, check out Colby, the D4.
Colby, D4 Deep Dive. My buddy, he's very good at the practical optimization techniques.
And he's got that, watching his guides, it almost feels like a Bob Ross video. He's got that like soft melodic tone as he's bringing you through the guides. So another big thing I've been seeing as, I mean, it's always existed, but it's been kind of a growing movement in RPGs lately for some reason, is the once again rise of solo play. A lot of people doing solo play stuff lately, and optimization ends up being a big part of this as well, because they want to like optimize all parts of the games. What do you think of this, like the once again bigger rise of solo play happening again?
Fairly uninitiated. I know it's a thing, but I'm uneducated on the matter, so I probably don't have a lot to offer. I suspect it has to do with sometimes it's hard to find people to play with, right? And so I suspect it is a movement of necessity as much as anything.
I've been having a hard time wrapping my brain around it. I get why maybe people would do it. It's like reading a novel, you get your own experience out of it and stuff. To me, these are like social group games and stuff like that, plus the creativity, the GM for the unexpected. So maybe not my bag, but
yeah. I find for me, if I'm meeting, even online, though less online than in person, but even online, about 50% of our interactions are social interactions and have nothing to do with the game at all.
Yeah.
Right. We're constantly going off of topic and, just joking around. Right.
Yeah. I feel like the solo players, and if you are a solo player and you want to let me know more about it, I think Solo RPG Guy, you hang around the channel sometimes. Let me know. I mean, I see a lot of people getting into it. I might as well learn about it, even if it's not my thing. But it seems to be a bigger and bigger movement. So I was like, oh, might as well ask about it. So what we'll do. First of all, do you have any, like, this is a chit chat. It's not just an interview. Do you have any questions for me before we move on? Any things you want to know?
So you're running Cypher on Thursday. Is that like your system of choice then? Is that?
I think at the moment, like, I play a lot of systems, but I think at the moment Cypher is kind of my system of choice. I tend to run a little bit more of a narrative game, and Cypher gives the tools to support that, to let the GM sort of screw around with things. Plus, it's
like mechanics?
Yeah, the mechanics. There's something called the intrusion, where a GM can offer, if a player wants to accept the GM complicating their life, they get experience out of it. So it's a give take. It's like, I get to fuck with your life, but you get a bonus out of it. And then the player can, if they want, they can spend experience and be like, no, I don't want you to do that right now. So it's a nice back and forth. And I like it because I'm a forever GM usually. I like it on the GM side because it's very, very easy to run.
And it's generic, right? Like generic.
It's a universal system, yeah. It started out as Numenera. Like, it wasn't its own thing at first. Monty Cook came out with Numenera, did the big Kickstarter for that. Then he came out with The Strange, which was like another setting for it. And then he's like, well, him and like Sean K. Reynolds and Shanna Germain and everybody was just like, all right, we're just going to make this a universal system.
Okay.
At that point.
There's not a lot of good universal systems. You've got Savage Worlds and GURPS and what else?
Fate.
But Fate, yeah. I haven't really gotten into any of them.
I tried GURPS several times years ago. It's messy. It was
GURPS was my system of choice for a short period. Well, not a short period of time, a reasonable period of time, but that was in like the early 90s, and it just hasn't aged well. Right.
It's got a very 90s design philosophy about it. Yeah. It was still decent. My first game of GURPS I played was actually the Discworld setting, Terry Pratchett's Discworld, and there was a GURPS setting for it. It was actually kind of fun, but yeah, no, Cypher is kind of my go-to just because it's easy to run because the GM doesn't roll any dice. You have other mechanics to deal with, but the GM doesn't have to roll any dice. Players get a little bit more narrative creativity out of it because they can do their own intrusions and stuff like that, which I think is really cool. And yeah, it's just straightforward. I just got to tell you numbers 1 to 10 and come up with a story and stuff. Well, let's get into some of the community questions here. Well, I haven't really thought about them myself or gone through them other than to make sure they're not naughty. And we'll try to answer them together and see how close and or far away our answers may be for some of these. It's usually a good way to learn about each other. So, Tiny Ferret Fingers asks, we play a pretty simple game. Old school, kick in the door, kill the goblin, get the treasure style of play. But we have one player that is so over the top with his accents and character personalities that it's actually being disruptive. But we know that this is a role-playing game and he's just role-playing. Are we being overly sensitive?
I would answer that your feelings are valid, right? If it bothers you and it's bothering the other players, then there's probably something there that's not just you. And I find that, especially if it's in-person play, and these are friends, right? I've always found that if I have an issue or the group has an issue, the absolute best way to deal with it is don't meet to play whatever game you're playing. Meet for coffee, sit down and chat about it.
Yeah.
And if you're friends, you'll work it out. I mean, just, be honest about how you feel about it, and give them explain what the rest of the group is feeling about it. And you'll find that surprisingly, adults are often acting like adults, especially when they're friends and you're in a casual setting and they don't feel like they're on trial.
I have to agree on that one. I don't know how many of these questions I was talking with, I think it was during the Shadowmane interview I had, where half these questions are just talk to them like an adult. They're a social issue, not a game issue.
And I do recommend don't do it as a group.
Oh, then they feel attacked.
Yeah. Do it one-on-one and do it away from the table, right? Just hang out, right? And talk. And, if you got a problem with a friend because they wear dirty shoes into your house, you have a conversation. If you have an issue with a friend because of something going on in gaming, you have a conversation. And you generally, if you're really friends, it'll work out.
And to get on the part of his question where this is a role-playing game and he's just role-playing, you play games for different reasons. If your group has a social contract that you just want to chuck dice, see shit killed, play with fun mechanics, stuff like that, and you're like, you do a bit of the role-playing thing, but it's not like the focus, then that's a valid way to play. And if he's doing it to the point where he's disruptive, then like he's not playing the way you guys are playing, and that's something that should be discussed in like a session 0, what is expected out of the game and stuff like that.
Yeah. And there are probably tables he could play at where what he's doing would be loved.
Yeah.
It just depends who you're with. But I mean, if that's the consensus of everyone else, there's no question what needs to change.
Because you can't play the game, you can't have fun wrong as long as you're not hurting somebody. So the statement where it seems like he feels bad because it's a role-playing game, I don't think he's being overly sensitive. Not if the group has a certain way they want to play.
No. If it's bothering you, that's valid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So let's go to Mega Mamazard. Asks, I can't imagine running a game where we aren't all just playing people, or at least people shaped. Have you ever run a game session where players were playing all actual animals?
Animals?
Just straight up animals.
No, I don't think so.
I have a couple of times. I've done Secrets of Cats twice, which is where everyone plays a house cat, but with secret magical powers to protect their burdens, which is the humans, against ancient like Lovecraftian horrors that are like impinging upon Earth. It's you still have to anthropomorphize, I think, to a degree. Like,
I mean, I've certainly played characters that aren't humanoid, but not in that kind of campaign. Like I've played, Rollmaster had a space version. Was it Space Master or something like that? And I remember I played a parasite in that one. It was like a symbiote, and a psychic symbiote. And so I didn't have a physical form at all in that one. And it was good. It was fun.
I think in a way you still have to, no matter what they are, you're still a person, so it's going to be hard to get into the complete mindset if you're just an animal. And I don't even know how you would run a game where you have animal intelligence.
Yeah, that's I didn't even think about that. Yeah, if you're playing just animals, that doesn't sound appealing.
It's got to be it's got to be anthropomorphized in some way, even if it's just mentally. Like people with animal bodies. Animals. I couldn't see being just animals.
You want to do Watership Down, and I'm playing a bunny. Okay.
Yeah, that's
but if you want to do Woods Across the Street, and I'm playing a bunny, no.
I mean, maybe someone will have fun with it. I can't see how it would work. Half the characters would be like, I just get distracted with food and leave. I don't get how you'd have a quest or anything with that. Myself. So game session where all actual animals, it has to be just a flavoring at that point. to answer your question, Mega Mamazard. If you're actual animals, you can't be 100% animals. I don't think that would work. Not at all. There are RPGs devoted to you being like animal people out there. I can't remember the name of some of them now, but they have that like Redwall type feel to it, where you're like little mice running around with swords and armor and stuff. So, I mean, if you want that could probably float your boat.
I mean, I could see like imagine if you're playing D&D, just generic, and you want to role play what your warhorse does in for a period of time. That could be entertaining for 10 minutes. Oh, I don't think you're going to get a campaign out of it.
There was one thing I wanted to do where everyone would sort of play an animal, where I wanted to do the setup where everyone starts out, the game you start out with these really powerful wizards, and everyone gets captured. And the rest of the game is you playing their familiars, trying to get the wizards back.
I have played a wizard's familiar as a character as well.
Yeah, but generally you're intelligent.
Third edition. Yeah, I was an imp. It was fun.
Yeah, you gotta have the, and I remember in second edition I played stuff like that a couple of times. There was the I'm a What article that came out in one of the Dragon magazines that let you play, like you specifically were like a polymorphed human into an animal, but you're still smart. And I remember,
And the reverse of that, I played the awful Palladium system, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where you start out as an animal that gets mutated into
I remember a friend going nuts over that. Yeah. It's like, it's TMNT. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, let's try it out. Oh, this is Palladium. Okay. Okay. Of the Palladium systems, I guess it was one of the better ones, but it's still polished turd. In my opinion. I'm sorry, lovers of Rifts and Palladium out there.
Yeah. I mean, the original Palladium was just a D&D knockoff, and it was... there are good ideas in the book. Like, you had different kinds of wizards, and they would all do like an entirely different system for magic. One was based on circles that you drew, and and various different things. Some were elemental based, but the implementation is terrible. It's just the mechanics. Mechanics are awful.
A lot of people try to argue with this with before. They're like, oh, they've refined the rules over time and stuff. And I'm like, no, because like Kevin himself has said, like, all the rules are still in play, and me and my friends have actually gotten like to not full on chat, but like message back and forth with him a few times about some stuff like, how does dual wielding work? There's like 3 different sets of rules for dual wielding, and 2 of them conflict with each other. And he's like, I don't know. Or like what, like an RCC versus just a race, like a racial character class versus a race. Some of them aren't labeled which one they are. And he's like, I'll add it to the list. I'm like, there's a list?
And Rifts is the worst role-playing game of all time that I have ever encountered in terms of balance.
Yeah.
Are you going to play a wilderness scout or a glitter boy? Which is it going to be? Yeah.
Well, I've literally played in a group where one person played a barmaid and another person played a demigod. So, yeah. Not that you always need perfect balance in an RPG. It depends on the RPG, but this isn't like a narrative. It's not like Fate. This isn't a narrative RPG. Rifts had a lot of crunch to it. So the fact that there was 0 balance was a little much.
Perfect balance is a far, far cry from what you see in Rifts. Rifts is in like just off the charts in imbalance.
Because like you get dealt 300 mega damage and you're playing a barmaid, like you just explode. There's nothing you can do about it.
You take 1 mega damage as a barmaid.
Yeah, because it's 100 regular damage.
But if you take it as a glitter boy, you shrug it off.
Yeah. All right. I won't hate on Rifts anymore. I know exactly which channels are about to come after me for it. It was a system. It was a system. All right, let's move on to the next one. Bingles and chips. I'm a forever DM, so when my friend told me to join a game for someone that he knows, I got very excited. And I don't think a DM has to be perfect at what he's doing, but it's obvious this guy hasn't actually even cracked open the books. The rules are all over the place, and he says, I'm just being a pedantic perfectionist. Am I expecting too much here? Should I loosen up about the rules?
That's a tough one because I feel you. I'm a rules guy, right? My channel is half optimization, half rules analysis, because I love having a rule set where you know how things are supposed to work. And I think if you have a character, you should know how it works. And if the DM hasn't, or the GM hasn't read the rules, then I don't know what the point is. If you're playing a game with rules, like why even play a specific set of rules?
Yeah.
You could go and play pretend in the backyard, and have no rules.
Yeah.
I am of the opinion you need rules. The DM doesn't have to be have perfect knowledge of the rules, but it's still a game with rules, right? And if I am a DM, especially if I'm playing a game that I'm not 100% up on, and a player is respectful and just points out, oh, actually, when you do this, it works this way, I appreciate it. Oh, I just learned something. Great. And then, I know what to do. And if nobody knows, then I make it up. And that's fine.
Yeah.
Right.
And you figure it out after.
Fine. And you figure it out after. But if the player knows the rules and the DM doesn't know the rules, that's really frustrating. It is really frustrating if the DM is totally closed off to, letting you play by the rules. I would find that incredibly frustrating.
I mean, there's a G in RPG for a reason. It's a game, and to be a game, there's got to be rules. Even in a narrative system like Cypher or Fate, where you are meant to sort of bend or break the rules sometimes, it's because there are rules to follow that allow you to do it. You're not just doing it willy-nilly all the time. There's rules to help guide you and give you those tools for it. And in a game like, I'm assuming they said DM, so I'm assuming D&D, it's a much more like firm rule set, regimented rule set. There's a lot of like character abilities or actions that need like specific measurements and stuff like that. If you're being that loose with the rules, like I can see maybe house rules and stuff like that, but if you're being that loose with the rules, it's just, you're just playing in the GM's make believe and you're not playing the game in that case.
I have to say, if I was in that person's situation, I would evaluate, am I still having enough fun to make this worth my Friday night? And if I'm not, you're probably not going to be able to fix it if that's their attitude when you bring up the rules. So I would cut my losses.
Because I had that pretty much the exact same situation. It was last year, might have been 2 years ago now. A buddy was like, hey, this guy wants to, he's GM'd a lot before, or DM'd a lot before. He knows what he's doing. I'm like, all right, great. I'm a forever DM. I would like to play in a game. And he's like, it's just going to be like a few sessions long. Cool. Go into it. One of the first rolls he has me make is an insight check on a statue. On some stonework. And I'm like, because I was like a dwarf and I wanted to figure out the stonework. He's like, all right, make an insight check. I'm like, are you sure? And the measurements, like some of the, like one of the creatures he gave exact measurements for, and it worked out that the creature was like 1.5 squares wide by 3.7 squares long, and like everything was all over the place, and it actually ended up breaking my character at one point, and I think it only lasted one session. So it was really bad.
Yeah,
you don't have to be perfect.
I mean, when I'm a DM, I don't always follow the rules, right?
Yeah.
Character wants to, I want to shoot my fireball at the ice wall and see if it melts it. I'll probably let you do it.
Rule of cool.
But but a DM should be mindful of when they're going off script, right? And if it's just all off script, then there's no structure, and I don't see the point in playing a game with no structure at all.
No. Yeah, one of my things that I always say is I encourage my players to haggle with me. If like the baseline of the core rules is there, but I will always say, okay, this is how it's normally played. if you haggle with me and you'd be like, oh, but I think it would be cool in this situation, I go with it. I'll be like, okay, cool. It's normally played this way, but in this one circumstance, I think it would be cool to play it this way. And it's important to set expectations.
Yeah.
Especially if you're doing a house rule, set expectations.
Yeah. You definitely want to be careful if it's like something that is not supported by the rules, as well as potentially game breaking. That it's I'll let you do it today, but I don't want my game to turn into this every combat. Yeah,
that's a very important metric to set, just in case,
because it will. That's what your game will now become. I'm popping in and out of the rope trick on my turn, shooting once, going back in, and now I'm invincible. Do you want your entire game to be that? Because if you allow it, that's what it will become.
And I mean, I can't say much, especially my younger years. I was that guy a couple of times. I took that extra kilometer, like.
Well, and sometimes players ask for things that they think they want, and then you give it to them, and then they discover they didn't want it, right? Because that same player that is doing that is going to get bored of that game. Just going to get bored of it.
Yeah, I've had that before. Create that one-trick pony. Think it's awesome, kind of break it a bit, but then like another situation comes up or we're doing something different. I'm like, well, I'm kind of bored now. And that's my fault.
Or you're just doing the same thing over and over again. We're going to cast Web, back up Eldritch Blast. And in this fight, we're going to cast Web, back up Eldritch Blast. And in this fight, we're going to Web, back up. And it was sure fun the first time. And it's not so fun the 80th time.
Yeah. Or the players with the Devil's Sight and the Darkness combo. And which was super huge for a while. Yeah. It's at this point you're not being a pedantic perfectionist, bingles and chips. I mean, don't expect perfection out of your GM. I screw shit up all the time. And it's okay.
Maybe you are being a pedantic perfectionist. I'm not there. But based on what I've heard, I can certainly empathize with working with a DM who doesn't seem to want to be playing a game at all.
Yeah, it's good to have the base, the core structure of it, at least. And if they do things different, I mean, this is another situation where, I mean, this is partly a rules issue, but it's a lot just social, like, you need to talk to them or leave.
In this case, I don't think it's something you're going to fix with a conversation, right? If that's the way the DM plays, I don't think it's reasonable to ask them to change. But I do think it's reasonable to decide for yourself if it's worth it for you to play in that game.
There are other groups out there. If you don't mind playing online, there's like a ton of groups out there. You just got to shop around, unfortunately. And sometimes, yes, you'll get nightmare groups. I've had nightmare groups online, very much so, but just keep shopping around. You'll find one. I think we've all had horror stories of, I don't know if you've played a lot. Have you played a lot of just with random people on the internet games aside from Thursday?
Well, I play. Okay. So two of my patron levels involve playing games with me. So that involves playing with a lot of people, hundreds of people that I've never met.
Oh, there you go.
And I got to tell you that 99.9% of the time, it's just fine. But I have been in groups where there has been a problem player, or a problem DM, and or a problem vibe of the group itself, and I just had to get out of there. But I gotta say, I haven't run into it much recently. Like when I think of my horror stories, they're all from when I was much younger. I have had very few horror stories recently, partially because I'm a bossy person, and I'm if there's something that is going off the rails, I shut it down. And when I'm playing with patrons, I have some influence that's granted to me.
Yeah.
To if something's going the wrong way, I'm just, let's not do this, and it's gone, right? And I have lost patrons because I've shut something down and they didn't like it. But that's fine. Yeah. Bye-bye.
You weren't worth it. I'm sorry. Thank you for stopping by.
Yeah, that's right. And so it's kind of self-curates, right? And so I end up playing, like, I'll play each month 10 games with patrons, which is pretty busy schedule, because it's like 2 to 3 games a week. And they are almost universally just great groups to play with. Of course, patrons, I love you.
You hear that? You got some place to spend some bank if you want to play with TreantMonk. You just gotta get to those upper echelons there.
There's some limits on those levels that don't fall below the max very often, but
that's good. Yeah, it's I think you're right I think it's partly the movement. There's been a lot of the movement in understanding inclusivity, equality, like doing proper session zeros, lines and veils. Like everyone's been a lot more mindful of each other, which is surprising because people on the internet is normally a dumpster fire. But it does seem to have been getting better in a lot of ways. I've only had like one or two, and I've been able to weed them out before actually playing with them. Like one guy being like, "Hey, I won in your game," and I'm like, "Hey, you seem kind of cool." Like, yeah. Any lines or veils? He's like, "Oh, I don't want like women or trans people or anything." I'm like, "Well, that's the rest of the group, so I guess you're not in this one because I have a trans member. I have the woman like you're bye." But I haven't run into that much. Whereas, like, yeah, I think of back in the day, and I like my worst horror story is still the fact that like I started when I was 11, I think. And the first group I played with for the first like 4 or 5 years, there was this one guy. We were all young, like teens, like 20 or below. He was like 45, and he would only play female seductress priestesses. I don't need to fill in the rest, but looking back on it now as I'm an adult, that was bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think like we do session zeros, but there's so much that I think is just common sense stuff to avoid, right? Like maybe you're playing in a group where extremely graphic violence is all good, but why don't we just assume it's not?
Yeah.
Right? like we don't have to have a session zero. Are you okay with extreme graphic? No, let's just not do it.
Yeah, if you don't know extreme anything is a bad idea unless you've talked to them first.
Yeah, well, and stuff like the sexual situations. Do we need to role play those? Probably not.
No,
probably not. Like we could just skip that part.
Like with the thing I sent out for the Cypher game, like where I was going because we don't have a session zero, so I sent out like a lines and veil document, and like under the sexual stuff, I'm like completely no or fade to black. There's nothing else for me because I am not doing that.
It should just be a common sense thing that unless you're playing with, your orgy group, and that's the reason you're playing, it should just be assumed that certain things are going to be off the table. And even if everybody's okay with them, you still don't need to have them in your game. Is it really adding anything to have? I'm not going to even list the things that could be in a game because, I don't even want to say some of them.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't need to be informed that that's not okay in our game if we're a DM. We should just not have it in our game in the first place. There's certain things that we all know are fine. The goblins come out. They swing a sword at you, and there's a fight, and everybody's okay. We're playing D&D. We know that's fine. But if you're going into areas that are going to be potentially controversial, you better know the people you're playing with really, really well. I wouldn't do that with strangers, even with the session zero. I just wouldn't even go there, right? Like, don't even bring it up. Just don't do it. I don't know. That's my opinion.
So here's an interesting one. My buddy BHG, I think was the one that pointed this out to me the other day, and I haven't wrapped my brain about how I would deal with this yet, but there was someone asking for advice. They were playing a game, and part of the game was like one of the characters was playing like a cook, and they like had like hunted a boar and they were cooking it up. But one of the other players was like a very, very hardcore vegan, and even slaughtering the boar in the game was too much for them. I don't know. I have a hard time.
That kind of stuff would have to be brought up in session zero.
Yeah.
Because no one can just assume that that's going to bother anybody. Right? So I think a player who does something like that I think there's a reasonable expectation to be informed that that's not okay before you do it, because hunting is if we're in a role-playing game, it's not even real life. Like hunting in real life could be somewhat controversial, right? But if you're in a role-playing game, I think it's a little different.
Especially like a medieval fantasy setting where like you sometimes do it to survive.
I don't hunt, and I have no interest in hunting, but I've hunted in game, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because it depends on what the group agrees on. Like that's the social contract, I think, at that point.
Yes, yeah, and I do think like I've had people who I role played with for 20 years plus. There was and we had problem of players along the way, but we eventually had a group where we didn't need a session 0 because we all knew each other and we knew what the lines were, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you're married, if you're dating somebody and you want to know what the lines are, you need to find out what those lines are.
Yeah.
But when you know somebody intimately for many, many years, you know exactly what's okay and what's not. You don't need to be told.
Yeah. I still do check-ins every once in a while. I'll just be like, hey, has anything changed? But other than that, I have my personal like home group, and session 0s for us, if we do them, is more about like the details of the campaign and character creation for that group.
Yeah.
We don't need to go through the social contract stuff because we've done it. We're good.
Yeah. Yeah. It eventually becomes, what are you playing? Okay. What am I playing? Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any house rules we want to use for this one?
Yeah. Once again, setting expectations, house rules. Because if I go into a game and there's like, he's house ruled things, but I don't know he's house ruled things, and it's just played differently, I would like to know ahead of time, please.
Oh, in my game, paladins don't smite. Sorry.
Yeah. It's like, well, that's fun.
I'm glad I made one.
Now, if stuff happens because of stuff that happened in game, I remember playing in a 2nd edition Ravenloft game, played a character focused around dual wielding weapons. And in the first, like, I would say half an hour of the game, I broke my arm, lost both my weapons, and could only find a 2-handed sword. But it was a fun role-playing experience. I made it work. I had rope. I learned how to do it.
Yeah, and Ravenloft is supposed to have you kind of not sure what to do.
Yeah. It was fun. It was good times. So I think we're getting nearing the end. I don't have any more community questions or anything like that. Is there anything you have upcoming you want to plug? Any personal projects or anything like that?
No, I'm basically just doing my regular stuff right now. I'm not involved.
Check out the channel.
There was a lot of opportunities there very recently to get involved in development of new role-playing games. But to me, it just seemed like it was what everybody was doing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this just seems like the worst time to do it because
there's a lot with Black Flag going on.
The market is going to be flooded. Role-playing games very soon.
Because MCDM finally did his official announcement for it, even though he's been live streaming it for a while. Terran, of course, Indestructible Boy, he's doing his Vagabond.
Vagabond.
Which actually looks pretty promising. Like he's showed me a lot of it.
He's shown me some of it, and I have a lot of respect for Terran as a game designer.
Yeah.
I've plugged his stuff on my channel before, just because I think he comes up with really good ideas and he implements them well.
Mm-hmm.
So he did not offer me anything
to pick it apart. Yeah, well, he's still pretty in early stages. Like it's not even like playable yet per se or anything. The
thing that always blows me away about Terran is he will design at the same time that he is doing a live stream and interacting with the audience. That's like a superpower. Yeah. I don't know how you do that.
I was asking him about that the other day too, because like he doesn't just, he does the game design and the book layout all while talking to people. And I'm like, I have to separate those things. Like,
and he's coming up with the ideas at the same time.
Yeah.
And I get sometimes asked about what about doing live streaming of you optimizing a character? I'm like, I wouldn't be able to. It would be terrible because I have to do the one thing.
Hear that, Taryn? We're gushing about you. Can't wait for Thursday now. We'll all play together. Yeah. So I think in that case we're all set. Once again, all the links for all of Chris's stuff will be down in the doobly-doo below, which is mostly just the YouTube channel, really.
It's just a YouTube channel link, but click it.
But click it. Click it. And he'll have like his Patreon link and stuff on there as well, because maybe give him a few bucks for a Canuck, as I say for myself as well. You never know. It'll be helpful. Get some stuff out of it. All that good stuff.
Yeah, give me those American dollars.
Yeah,
I like those.
Yeah, I was going to my drive-thru RPG the other day to get a payout from my last book, and I'm like, oh, that seems like a fair amount, forgetting that that's in USD. And then it converted over to Canadian dollars, and I'm like,
one of the biggest changes in my life in the past 3 years is now whenever the Canadian dollar is down, I'm like, yes.
I know, right?
Keep going down.
Because we get paid in the US, and then it's nice. Yeah, because I think it's like a 1.36 difference or something like that right now, and it's insane. So, yeah, keep doing it. All right, thank you, everyone, for joining for another QEDTalks. I think this has been pretty good. We managed to get it into the hour mark, which is really good. So, as always, stay healthy, stay safe, and have a good one, eh?